The Young and the Restless spoilers. Tuesday spoilers. Full episodes May 13, 2025. In the dim glow of Genoa City's skyline, the air was thick with anticipation and unspoken dread as multiple threads of ambition, betrayal, and confession began to converge. The first movement in this symphony of intrigue belonged to Mariah Copeland, who stood alone in the private parlor of her penthouse, fingering the invitation to the party Claire Grace Newman had insisted would set Victor's mind at ease. Mariah had agreed only reluctantly. She who had once been lauded as the family's moral compass now found herself harboring secrets so heavy that each heartbeat sounded like a ticking clock counting down to her confession. As she smoothed her dress and practiced the words she would speak, guilt and fear warred within her. She knew that Claire believed a lavish gathering, champagne flutes, glittering chandeliers, and an audience of the city's most influential might soothe Victor's suspicions about Mariah's recent absences and furtive phone calls. In truth, Mariah feared that the glare of so many expectant eyes would only spotlight her shame. Yet she steeled herself, whether under the safety of public scrutiny or the privacy of Victor's stern gaze, the truth would have to emerge. Meanwhile, Claire Grace Newman, ever the strategist, oversaw every detail of the event with a fervor usually reserved for corporate takeovers. She had convinced herself that a display of unity, family members arm in arm, toasts raised to resilience, might soften Victor's resolve and persuade him to halt his relentless scrutiny of Mariah. Yet beneath her poised exterior lay an undercurrent of calculation. The real purpose of the party was to force Victor into a corner, to present him with an ultimatum so bold that he would have no choice but to broker peace on Claire's terms. What Victor came to learn at that gathering, however, would exceed even Claire's considerable machinations. Against this backdrop, a far more dangerous game unfolded in hushed corners and private chambers: Phyllis Summers's betrayal of Billy Abbott. Their meeting had been arranged at the stately Chancellor Mansion, where Phyllis arrived with every step calculated to convey the controlled fury burning within. As Victor Newman welcomed her with that cool, assessing look, Phyllis did not immediately unveil the intelligence she had amassed. Instead, she measured her words like a chess master contemplating the opening move. Victor, accustomed to both allies and adversaries divulging their stakes without hesitation, pressed for immediate disclosure. Phyllis, however, held her silence as both shield and weapon. "I'll tell you everything," she finally declared, her tone both weary and defiant, "but not until you guarantee what's rightfully mine." In that moment, the truce was sealed. Victor would gain critical insight into Billy's clandestine strategies, and Phyllis would reclaim her position in the power hierarchy. Though whether within Abbott or in one of Victor's ever-expanding empires remained to be negotiated. When at last Phyllis did speak, her revelations landed like thunderbolts. She laid bare Billy Abbott's grand design to resurrect the Chancellor legacy, deploying a covert alliance with Aristotle Dumas to secure a controlling stake in Chancellor Industries, a move that would not only sideline Abbott but potentially collapse its valuation. She had uncovered confidential memos outlining a phased transfer of key vendors to Billy's unbranded streaming platform and detailed projections that sketched a future in which Abbott would hemorrhage its most lucrative contracts. Moreover, she whispered of overheard conversations between Billy and Dumas regarding a secret contingency fund, capital siphoned discreetly to underwrite their takeover bid, that even most Abbott insiders were unaware existed. Victor absorbed each detail in grim silence, his mind racing through countermeasures. Phyllis watched him carefully, noting the slightest twitch of his lips or narrowing of his eyes, clues to how deeply her intelligence had pierced his defenses. Back at the party, as the clinking of glasses and polite laughter masked the undercurrent of tension, Mariah Copeland took her place by Victor's side. The patriarch's steely gaze shifted from Phyllis to Mariah, and in that moment, Mariah felt the weight of every secret she carried. She had agreed to confess here, amidst opulence and ostentation, because Claire had convinced her that an atmosphere of celebration might weaken Victor's resolve, that the promise of unity could pave the way for mercy. But as Victor's eyes searched hers for signs of duplicity, Mariah realized that no amount of grandeur could soften the blow of her own betrayal. Whether she spoke now or later, the fallout would be explosive. Meanwhile, across the room, Billy Abbott lingered at the fringes, unaware that his former ally had turned informer. Sally Spectra, ever vigilant, observed Phyllis's furtive glances and whispered warnings in his ear, "She's about to sell you out to Newman." Billy had dismissed Sally's concerns initially. After all, Phyllis and he had shared victories and heartbreaks in equal measure. But as the night wore on and he sensed Victor's measured approval at each nugget of intel Phyllis offered, a sickening realization dawned: he had underestimated Phyllis's resentment, and in doing so, had handed his adversary a weapon far more potent than any competitor's quarterly report. Victor, pocketing the latest data chips Phyllis had provided, offered her a curt nod of acknowledgement. His lips curved into a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. A smile that said both gratitude and warning. Phyllis felt a shiver run down her spine. She had traded Billy's downfall for a seat at Victor's table, but she understood, as anyone who knew Newman well would, that such an alliance demanded everlasting loyalty. In the ensuing silence, as the orchestra's waltz chords signaled the next toast, Phyllis raised her glass, her smile radiant yet hollow. Across the room, Billy's face tightened as he watched her, suspicion blossoming into alarm. He caught Sally's eye, seeking reassurance, but found only the reflection of his own dread. As midnight approached, Claire seized the moment to draw Victor aside. With a confidence born of months of careful plotting, she outlined her vision. She would orchestrate Mariah's clemency, brokered by Victor's promise to shield her from public scandal, in exchange for Mariah's full cooperation in stabilizing the family facade. Victor listened, every muscle taut, then inclined his head. An unspoken acknowledgement that Claire's gambit had merit. Yet as he turned away to address Phyllis, Claire realized that her carefully crafted equilibrium now rested on a knife's edge. Outside the palace of chandeliers and mirrors, alliances had already begun to realign, and the true machinations of power were just beginning to unfold. In the hush of that final hour, Mariah stepped forward. Surrounded by the glittering elite, she drew in a steadying breath and met Victor's gaze. The words tumbled from her lips in a confession that would reverberate long after the last toast was made. Phyllis watched from across the room, glass in hand, aware that her betrayal of Billy had set a far greater drama in motion, one that would test loyalties, reshape empires, and define futures. Billy, sensing the tide turning irrevocably against him, braced himself for the reckoning he had never seen coming. And Victor, master architect of so many schemes, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. In one evening, he had leveraged every secret, every weakness, to bend the Abbott family to his will. Yet even as he savored this fleeting victory, he knew that Genoa City's greatest players never rested, and that the game had only just begun. In the stillness of the Copeland home, where every photograph on the mantelpiece seemed to watch with quiet expectation, Tessa Porter sat hunched on the edge of the sectional sofa, her fingers knotted together so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. A single lamp cast a pool of warm light across the room, illuminating the anxiety etched into her face. She had spent the last week replaying every moment, every whispered conversation between Mariah and Victor, trying to divine what secret could reduce her wife to tears and furtive absences. But the more Tessa searched for answers, the deeper her own guilt sank in. If Mariah had shut her out, if Mariah had retreated into a cocoon of silence and sorrow, then perhaps it was Tessa's fault. The fallout from her brushes with Ian Ward. The reckless trust she had placed in him, the moments of doubt it inspired in Mariah's heart, had left a rupture between them. When Ian had resurfaced with late-night phone calls and secretive messages, Tessa had reassured Mariah that there was nothing to fear, that Ian was a figure from the past who posed no threat to their future. Now, in the cold light of guilt, Tessa wondered if her naivete had jeopardized the woman she loved most. Mariah emerged from their bedroom doorway, her silhouette framed by the faint glow of the hallway. She wore a simple dress, no trace of glamour, no attempt to mask the turmoil within, and for a moment Tessa thought she might turn away. But instead Mariah crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps, each one an echo of the resolve in her eyes. The tension that had coiled between them over the past days seemed to unspool in that moment as Mariah stopped in front of Tessa and reached out, her hand trembling as it hovered above Tessa's knotted fingers. "Tessa," she said softly, a single word that carried years of love and regret. Tessa looked up, tears already welling, and Mariah squeezed her hand gently. "None of this is your fault," she began, her voice steady despite the pain beneath it. "You did nothing wrong." Tessa's breath caught. She had rehearsed so many apologies, so many confessions of her own blame, that the idea of innocence felt foreign in her own mouth. "But you haven't told me what's wrong," she whispered. "I've tried to protect us. I've tried to be honest, and yet you've shut me out. I don't know what to do." Mariah's eyes glistened as she knelt down, pulling Tessa into an embrace. The lamp's glow danced across their entwined forms as she pressed her forehead against Tessa's. "You're not the one who needs forgiveness," Mariah said. The confession was a gentle admission, but it rang with the weight of something far darker. "I've made mistakes, grave mistakes, but none of them are yours to bear." Tessa pulled back, searching Mariah's face for a clue to the nature of these mistakes. She thought of the rumor mill that had churned through Port Charles. The whispers that Mariah had slept with someone else in the dead of night, that she had hidden another lover behind closed doors. There were more sensational theories, too. Had Mariah taken a life in a moment of desperation? In soap operas, such rumors blossomed into full-blown scandals, and Tessa could feel the seeds of doubt, planted by her own fear, taking root in her heart. "Mariah," she said, her voice trembling, "did you?" She couldn't bring herself to voice the final words, but the question hung between them nonetheless. Mariah drew a steadying breath, her gaze unwavering. In that moment, Tessa realized that her wife stood at a crossroads. She could continue to cloak her past in shadows, or she could step into the relentless glare of the truth. A quiet stillness settled over the room as Mariah weighed her choice. Then, with a grace that belied the storm inside her, she rose and took Tessa's hand. "When I left town," she said, each word deliberate, "I did things I'm not proud of. I hurt people who trusted me." The confession was not the titillating revelation Tessa had feared, but the raw acknowledgement of Mariah's own fallibility. "I never cheated on you," Mariah insisted, her eyes fierce with sincerity. "And I didn't kill anyone. But I did lie. I lied to you and I lied to myself." Tessa let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, but relief was quickly replaced by fresh concern. "Why did you lie?" she asked, her voice soft. "What were you so afraid I'd think?" Mariah closed her eyes, the memory of that time flooding her senses, the endless hotel room nights, the clandestine meetings with Victor's people after hours, the guilt that gnawed at her conscience as she passed unspeakable documents from one hand to the other. "I was scared of losing you," she admitted. "I thought if I told you the truth, that I had agreed to help Victor in ways that went beyond what I believed was right, you'd leave me." Her words trembled on the edge of confession, but stopped short of revealing the full extent of her involvement, the blackmail she'd facilitated, the corporate secrets she'd stolen, the lives she'd imperiled to protect her own standing within the Newman fold. Tessa squeezed her hand, urging her to continue, but Mariah hesitated, her breath catching. "There's more," she whispered, but the rest was swallowed by the quiet hum of the evening. Tessa searched Mariah's face, recognizing the familiar flicker of shame and fear. She brushed a strand of hair behind Mariah's ear and offered a reassuring smile. "We'll face this together," she said. But as she spoke, Mariah's gaze drifted toward the front window, where the first sliver of dawn peeked over the horizon. Somewhere out there lay Ian Ward's shadowy legacy, murky rumors of clandestine experiments, of lives manipulated and perhaps even lost, all in the name of secrets that had driven Mariah into Victor's orbit in the first place. The truth felt too vast, too dangerous to fully expose in one night. And yet Tessa's unwavering presence gave Mariah the courage to continue. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself for the confession that would strip away the last layer of deception. But before she could speak, the chime of the front door startled them both, a reminder that in Genoa City, secrets were never safe for long. The moment hung suspended. Would Mariah finally unveil the full extent of her misdeeds, or would she retreat once more into silence, offering only half-truths to those she loved? As Tessa stood, ready to catch her wife if she stumbled, the answer remained uncertain, a promise of drama yet to unfold. In that fragile dawn, as love and fear warred within the Copeland home, one truth became crystal clear: the only way forward was through confession, and the only hope of redemption lay in the raw, unguarded exposure of every hidden deed, no matter how sinister it might seem. Claire's instinct to throw a party as a way to win Victor's blessing is classic. She's banking on spectacle and social proof to soften the hard lines of his disapproval. Here's how she likely sees it playing out, demonstrating solidarity by gathering everyone, Victor, Victoria, Nikki, Kyle, and key Abbott Newman allies, under one roof. Claire wants to show that her relationship with Kyle isn't a reckless fling but a source of genuine happiness and stability. In her mind, Victor will witness firsthand the way Kyle supports her, how the other family members rally around them, and conclude that, if everyone else respects the match, so should he. Shifting Victor's perspective from private to public, Victor cares enormously about the family's image in Genoa City. A well-publicized event, complete with flattering press coverage and smiling photos of Claire and Kyle side by side, might pressure him to endorse the union. If the story in the tabloids reads young Abbott heir finds his match at lavish Newman Abbott fate, Victor risks looking petty or controlling if he refuses to acknowledge it. Leveraging Nikki and Victoria's influence, Claire has already secured Nikki's enthusiastic support and Victoria's cautious sympathy. A party gives both women a platform to speak candidly with Victor, in small, intimate side conversations over wine, about how much Claire and Kyle mean to them. Two powerful voices in his ear may carry more weight over a formal boardroom dispute. Potential pitfalls: superficial veneer. Victor isn't easily swayed by spectacle alone. He'll notice if the party's grandeur masks underlying tensions, if Nikki is visibly anxious, if Victoria's concern creeps into her tone, or if Kyle seems uncomfortable. Any sign of fakery could backfire and reinforce Victor's belief that Claire is manipulating appearances rather than confronting his real objections. Victor's core objections remain unaddressed. If Victor's disapproval is rooted in financial or legacy concerns, fears that Kyle isn't the right partner to carry on the Abbott name, a party won't change those fundamentals. Unless Claire can present hard evidence, a joint business plan, prenuptial terms, career ambitions, to allay his strategic worries, the gala may feel like a distraction. Unmet expectations lead to greater friction. Should Victor greet the party with cool politeness instead of wholehearted warmth, Claire risks deepening the divide. Feeling publicly rebuffed could make her even more determined, possibly pushing her into rash countermoves that escalate family conflict. Alternatives and enhancements: combine the party with substance alongside the celebration. Claire might unveil a concrete proposal. A joint Abbott-Newman philanthropic venture or a business pitch in which she and Kyle outline how they'll support the family empire. That turns the party into both a social event and a forum for strategic buy-in. A private pre-party conversation before the guest list arrives. Claire could ask Victor for a few minutes alone, a toast just between us, to acknowledge his concerns directly. Demonstrating respect for his perspective behind closed doors may make him more receptive when the room fills up. Enlist a neutral champion. Claire could invite an influential, independent Abbott-Newman confidant, someone Victor trusts who isn't invested in her emotional pitch, to speak on her behalf. A third-party endorsement can sometimes cut through family politics more effectively than direct appeals. Bottom line, a party can be a powerful stage. But it's only as convincing as the story you tell on it. If Claire uses the event to showcase real unity, address Victor's deeper objections, and back up her joyful facade with substance, it might just tip the balance. If she relies on sparkle alone, she risks insulting Victor's intellect and hardening his stance even further.